Oh, well, mostly it's very close by. So I'm based in Seville, it's not very far away, and obviously being involved with the sort of Spanish Java community over in Seville, it was really important for us to sort of be here as part of the Spanish Java community here as well, and sort of see what's going on with this conference, but also kind of raise the profile of Spanish Java developers, really. I'm always sort of skipping from thing to thing, but I guess my focus at the moment is Java 9. So JetBrains, in terms of doing IntelliJ IDEA, we really need to understand what developers are going to be using in Java 9, what IntelliJ IDEA needs to support for Java developers to make adopting Java 9 easier. So some of the stuff there is around, I'm working a little bit on projects which use Jigsaw, so how are developers going to use modularity, what's going to help them with the tools, and also with the REPL as well. So what do we need to provide inside IntelliJ to give people support they need for using JShell? My job is really to try and talk to as many developers as possible, so some of that is going to conferences, talking to people who go to the conferences, getting feedback from them. Sometimes it's going into companies, like last week I was talking at a couple of the big banks in London, so I go to them, find out what versions they're using, what are they doing. I use Twitter a lot, so people quite often ping me on Twitter saying, I'm trying to do this thing, how do I do it with IntelliJ? And people also send me emails and stuff and say, like, how do you do this? Or I really would like to do that, how can IntelliJ support me to do that sort of thing? I'm optimistic about Jigsaw. I think that so I guess the context obviously is for people who might not necessarily know, is that the executive committee voted no on the current phase of Jigsaw. So that doesn't necessarily mean that Jigsaw is a no, it's been thrown out, it's not part of Java 9 or anything like that. It means we've got 30 days for the spec leads for Jigsaw to come up with a spec which suits everyone, preferably everyone on the executive committee, but they represent all developers. So they've got 30 days to kind of come back and fix some of those problems. I'm optimistic about that because a lot of the people who voted no said, no, but what we'd like you to do is this, this and this. There was very solid feedback, and a lot of them are expecting to vote yes next time round. So it feels like a big upset in the community, but I think most people want it to succeed, most people want it to go into Java 9 and want Java 9 to come out maybe not July, but as soon as possible. So, and I think that this is exactly what the Executive Committee and the JCP is about. It's about trying to get specifications and standards that are going to work for all developers, not just for a smaller subset of people. I think Jigsaw is the biggest change. I think what's nice about Java 9 is lots of tiny changes. So things like the collections helper methods, I think they're going to be really useful, because when we're creating lists or sets or maps, it's quite tedious at the moment, and I think people will use that all the time. It's a tiny change, but I think people will use that a lot. I think for anyone who's doing things like spinning up their own services or managing their own services, things like the stack walking API and the process API, I think that will be really nice for them as well. And things like the work that's gone into making JavaDoc a better form of documentation, that will help us as developers as well. But there's not really any one big thing where I'm like, oh, you should adopt Java 9 because. I think there's loads of little things which will just make us a bit more productive as developers. I think Reactive has kind of won in terms of a standard for an asynchronous means of communication. So if you were thinking about doing asynchronous programming, I think lots of that community is using Reactive in some form, probably the Reactive Streams API. So, and I think that is why the Reactive Streams API has gone into the language. But yes, I think that now the Reactive Streams API is in the language in Java 9, I think that developers who weren't already working that way will start looking at it to sort of say, what is this? What does it mean for me? How can I use it? Is it useful? And I think it is useful because it applies a standard across the board, so people can use whichever Reactive framework they want, even different JVM languages, but still be talking the same language, because in terms of using the Reactive Streams API. So I think it definitely validates the work that's gone into the Reactive Streams API and all of the Reactive frameworks that are out there for the JVM. So I'm really happy to be here in Malaga and see what's happening in terms of the Spanish community here for the Spanish Java developers. I was really excited to see a lot of the developers in the room are from Spain. So it's not just, when I went to Spring I/O in Barcelona, obviously that has a very wide catchment in terms of a lot of Europe sort of goes there. But to me, it validates what we've seen inside the Sevilla Java community. There are a lot of good developers in Spain. They are keen to level up their knowledge. They're smart, they're driven, and I think this conference really helps to prove that.